All right. My name is Chris Campbell. I'm a practicing CPA, and I work with small businesses and individuals to help them pay the least amount of taxes possible while keeping them out of jail. So today I wanted to talk about what information is public, specifically with business taxes. I may touch on personal, but specifically with business taxes, what information is public? What can the public find out about you? This was brought up because I got a call from a friend of mine, and they were asking about the new reporting requirements to the Department of Treasury coming up in 2024. I did a video about it earlier, so you can check that out. Where you essentially have to let the Department of Treasury know about any businesses that you own. So that's new for 2024. As I said, I did a video about it, so check that one out for the details of it. But it just kind of had me thinking when I got this call. I would imagine that many people want to know what actually is considered public information, because that was one of the biggest concerns with the friend that called me, not necessarily reported to the government. It was a matter of what was considered public information. So I wanted to go over a few things as far as information that is public and information that isn't public when it comes to paying your business taxes and people knowing the status of your company, at least as it relates to taxes. So the main thing, and I've tried to do this a number of times, for a lot of companies it's not readily available. And I ask myself this: are you able to obtain a business's tax ID number? And the answer in the grand scheme of things is I've done a search for some tax ID numbers. I found some, and I've done searches that were unsuccessful. Now, when I've done my search, it's really been more so for the dependent care credit. Just a quick overview. If you have kids on your personal taxes, if you pay for a daycare or summer camp, you can get a credit for the tuition that you've paid. But the caveat is you have to report whom it is that you've paid this money to. So if you sent them to XYZ daycare and you paid XYZ daycare over the course of the year, you can get a deduction or credit for that on your taxes, but you have to report the information about the company that you've paid. So in this instance with XYZ daycare, you need to report on your return, I paid XYZ daycare this amount, and then you have to put information about XYZ daycare, where they're located, and specifically the tax ID number. Most of the searches I've done have been in relation to trying to find the tax ID number for a care provider. So the client would say, hey, I sent my kid to such and such, but they don't necessarily have the tax ID info. So if it's not readily available, in those instances, I've been somewhat successful, because with most of the daycares or camps, if they're in that business, they know that they have to provide that information. So some just outright publish it. But if you're in that business, you do have to provide your tax ID to people. So it's not necessarily that hard to find for folks in that industry. If you're not in that industry, it's pretty hard to find. It's not information that is readily available. It's not publicly available. There's no IRS database for that. If you were to try to call the IRS and try to get that information, if you're not the business owner or anyone in control of that business or an officer, you're going to have a hard time getting that information. So tax ID numbers are not readily available. Same thing with business tax returns. They are not public information. People would not be able to get their hands on that without getting permission from you. When you get mortgages or loans, sometimes they do ask for copies of the tax return. They don't necessarily want it from you because they want to make sure that you didn't fudge any of the information on there. So they will obtain a copy of your tax returns from the IRS, but they have to have permission to do so. You have to give them explicit information to do so. There's a form that the IRS has, I believe it's 4506. It is a form that you have to fill out and sign and provide to the person that wants to ask. Now, it is a bit different for nonprofits. If you do have a nonprofit organization, you do have an obligation to make your information, your returns, pretty much all of your data accessible to the public, mainly because it is a nonprofit and people want to be able to investigate said organization if they're relying on donations. So if you're a nonprofit, things are a bit different versus a for-profit organization. So it does require a bit more transparency with that. So Nonprofit, prepare to have your information available. And if you make over a certain threshold, when you report on that Form 990, if your nonprofit brings in a certain amount of income, I want to say $50,000, then you have to do a more extensive tax return where you list out the salaries of the officers. That is all public information as a nonprofit. There are companies out there that build a database of these companies and have obtained the copies of these returns. So you can easily be researched on that if you're in the nonprofit realm. Now, if you are a for-profit company, there is one aspect that is public information, and that is tax liens. So if you have a tax lien filed against your company, that is public information. It does require a bit of time, and a number of activities need to happen before a tax lien is filed. A lien is one of the last resorts to collecting taxes. People can't find out if you have a payment plan for taxes. So folks won't know if you necessarily owe any taxes. So it's not a matter of as soon as you owe taxes, people can look up and see that you owe it. It's when the liens are filed. And tax liens are usually filed after an extended period of time and you haven't resolved your tax debt. Then the state or the IRS will go and file that lien in an effort to collect the funds, and that becomes public information. If you've been in a scenario where you start receiving a lot of phone calls, you'll get calls from a lot of solicitors as far as tax debt resolution companies, but they get that information because they can look up tax liens because that's public information. So if you owe and you resolve your tax bill, if you go and you set up a payment plan before the lien is filed, then it won't make it to even becoming a lien. But even if you set up your payment plan once the tax lien is filed, that lien stays on until you've paid it. So let's say you get notice of the lien, you create a payment plan, that lien still exists until you finish paying it off, and then it'll get relieved. So you want to avoid tax liens. Get that payment plan in order prior to a lien getting filed. So as long as you address the bills, make out a plan, you're fine. You wouldn't have to worry about that sort of information becoming public. But again, once that lien is filed, all bets are off. That can easily be found. So that's all for now on this topic. Hope this helps. If you have any more questions about this topic or any other accounting or tax related questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help. All right, that's all for now, and I'll see you on the next one.